You are listening to the Music Ed Mentor Podcast, where we teach music educators how to build, manage, and grow thriving school music programs and have long and happy careers. I am your host, Elisa Jansen-Jones, and it is my honor to have you joining me for this episode today. I know how incredibly valuable your time is, and I feel so privileged that you're willing to spend time with me. This episode is absolutely going to be worth the time it takes for you to listen to it, because we are going to be talking step by step how to get government funding, because I'm sure you've heard there is a lot out there. I bring in my friend Mike Kamphuis, Managing Director of the Division of Education for Conn Selmer, who has been working for more than a decade on supporting schools to get more funding. We're talking about funding that you can get without having to run a fundraiser, without having to write a big grant, and that there is absolutely assigned for your school and your district and your case. We're also going to be talking about free supports for making that case for accessing the funding. We're going to be talking about how much is out there, why now is the best time of all to access it, and how to find the information that you need to make it happen. So be thinking, what would you do with extra funding for your program? But first, a huge shout out to Smart Music for supporting this podcast for the last several years. I can't believe we've been doing it together for so long, and I'm still absolutely thrilled. Smart Music just launched their new digital sheet music library with more than 13,000 new PDF titles, including more than 6,000 full scores. It's the fastest and easiest way for you to access sheet music for yourself and your students. This August, they'll be adding even more digital titles and making the entire digital sheet music library available for print users with print add-ons. So go to smartmusic.com today to get a quote. And while you're there, be sure to check out the show notes for this episode, as all the links that we talk about are accessible to you there. You're not going to want to miss that. If you're looking for some great professional development this summer, and you guys know I'm all about the PD, you're not going to want to miss the Conn Selmer Institute Connect, happening June 14th through 17th. This isn't going to be your standard run-of-the-mill online conference, and it is entirely online and accessible to you. There's performances and discussions, panel chats and casual chats. There's an entire Facebook group where you can network with all of the speakers and additional attendees. There will be guest appearances by the Hunter Tones, the Canadian Brass, John Baptiste, and Tia Fuller. It's a 4-day extravaganza of music education, really designed to help you hone your skills and help prepare you for the upcoming school year. For choir and elementary educators looking for some in-depth learning designed by music educators like you, go to musiceducationsummit.org. These are not online conferences, but they are online. It's 2 days full of practical workshops to help you be more prepared for next school year. They're interactive sessions entirely focused on practical classroom skills and strategies. So that's Conn Selmer Institute Connect and musiceducationsummit.org for those great PD opportunities this summer. Now, without further ado, my chat with Mike Kamphuis.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Kamphuis. I'm the Managing Director of Conn Selmer's Division of Education. Been with the company for about 20 years now in many different capacities, ranging from product development to most recently beginning our Division of Education back in June 2013, teamed up with Dr. Tim Lotzenheiser, who's our Vice President of Education. And we're a manufacturer of musical instruments, woodwind, brass, string, and percussion, and very honored to be a part of the Division of Education for Conn Selmer, based out of Elkhart, Indiana. So thanks for having me here today, Elisa.
My pleasure. So I want to pick your brain because you are one of the most well-read people when it comes to getting funding for your program. And I know that there's just a ton of information out there that people are having to weed through. So I kind of want to start with what is most easily accessible right now. I've heard a lot about ESSER funding and about how districts sometimes have surpluses. So if you can just start by like what's out there that we can grab right now and what's the easiest way for us to get it?
Absolutely. The good news back in 2015, music and the arts was passed in legislation at the federal government level as part of a well-rounded education, which gives music education access to education funding that comes through in different years. Obviously, this past year, we've been through quite a bit with COVID-19, and the federal government had to step in to help education in a big way. And it actually started March of 2020 with the CARES Act, which many are familiar with, that was signed into law around that time. As part of the CARES Act, there began this elementary and secondary education relief funding as part of the CARES Act. The first pass that occurred March last year was $30 billion. There was a second bill that was passed in December called the COVID Relief Package, which also had an ESSER fund element to it to the tune of $82 billion, $54 billion of that towards K through 12 education. And then most recently in March of 2021, $168 billion was passed with $126 billion going to K-12 education as part of the American Rescue Plan. And this funding, it's unprecedented, as many things have been over the last year, unprecedented. It's funding that you or I won't see in our lifetime again, quite honestly. A lot of the policymakers I talk to are saying it's about 8 times the normal Title I funding level that's currently out there. And it is readily accessible. And, the interesting thing is that even though the distribution of the funding follows Title I formulas. So basically, the federal government's taking those billions of dollars and they're pushing it down to the states via a Title I formula, and then the states have to distribute it to the district. It's not actually following Title I rules, so to speak. And in addition, the way districts can go get the funding is they use the Title IV grant process. Again, not following Title IV rules, but the same process they would do for a Title IV grant to put the plan together, get all the stakeholders together, and take that district plan and send it up to the state for approval. So a lot of districts are feverishly working on this right now. And honestly, I think a lot of folks still don't know that this funding is out there and that they can access it. So it's just one of those things that people have to advocate for right now and figure out how they can get it for their program.
Well, I know that a lot of districts have like a music or arts administrator who helps facilitate a lot of that within their own area, but there's also a lot of districts that don't, or private schools or charter schools that just don't have that sort of infrastructure, that person who can help create these big plans. Does that mean that they're out of luck, or can we do it as an individual teacher?
No, fortunately, we can do it as individuals. The key is to advocate, and it may take a little digging in some of the smaller districts, where a building principal might be the person that has access to the federal funds. There is someone in every district that sees the federal funding that's coming in, whether it's Title I, Title IV, et cetera. And the key is asking around, hey, have you heard of this title funding or this ESSER funding? Have you heard of the funding that's coming down from the federal government, and finding out who that is? Sometimes you may have to go up the chain 3 or 4 people, depending on the size of the district, to get to where that answer is. I will say, as folks are trying to find who the person is that is the driver for the federal funding for their district or program, it's very important also for the music educators to have a plan in place and have a needs assessment, and make sure that there's a good understanding of what their true needs are for the program. And I want to touch on just a few things that are quite interesting in regards to ESSER. There's 15 statutes that make it for music education that are actually in alignment with what music educators do. And I'll share some resources with you as well that we can send out to the listeners. But some of the examples are like PPE, which we're all familiar with now with the purchasing of masks, bell covers, protective equipment for the classroom, supporting training for music educators on strategies for in-person music instruction, also sanitization of instruments. And I'll touch on some further things on that in a moment. Also, obviously, internet connectivity, laptops or supplemental software needed, and that was meant. And I know there's going to be still some element of hybrid instruction and so forth places this fall. Also, one of the things that's very interesting is there's a piece that just came through over the last week as folks have been reading through the language that ESSER funding allows to pay for music educators where enrollment numbers have dropped due to COVID-19. So therefore, if programs are down, obviously, because we had a hard time recruiting this last fall, your numbers may have gone down. We want to give music educators the opportunity to build that program back up. So ESSER funding could be an opportunity to use that funding to give the educators a chance to rebuild their programs over the next 3 years. And by the way, the ESSER 3 funding, it'll stretch out until September 2024. The plan has to be submitted this year, but the funding can be extended over the course of the next 3 years. And obviously some other things like purchasing materials to set up the classroom to get back to in-person, socially distant equipment that might be needed, things of that nature. With the 15 statutes, I won't go through every single one by one today, but I will leave a resource where folks can study that. And just the things I've mentioned are highlighted within those. There's two specific, being that I work for an instrument manufacturer, folks are like, well, how do music instruments kind of relate to that? And there's two specific areas. One is, as I mentioned earlier, the purchasing supplies to sanitize instruments. I can't tell you how many people called me last April when COVID first hit and said, I have 3 kids on each of my tubas. I can't do that anymore. What do I do? And immediately we thought, how can we help and whatnot? We created a stimulus program as an organization to go along with the ESSER funding, and we gave away $1.1 million as a company last year to supplement budgets to about 200 districts and through 100 school music dealers. But the interesting thing we found at that time is that the sanitization of instruments aligned that statute specifically with the sharing of instruments. So that's one thing to look at for many districts. And it's primarily looking at like background brass instruments or harmony woodwind instruments such as bass clarinets, things that are shared for schools. And the other statute we see districts leaning into with instrumental music education are activities to address the unique needs of low-income children or students or children with disabilities. It's access and equity, which some of that language probably sounds familiar to many because that's part of Title I. Many districts are using the ESSER funding to create that accessibility in regards to music education. We have some districts using music and social emotional learning and providing that access for students to help them get back in a big way in regards to music education. So ESSER funding really at the core of it is available for music education in a big way.
I love that. So many great ideas. And, huge kudos to Conn Selmer for coming up with the whole stimulus program. I know we're working really hard to get instruments in the hands of so many more people and so many more students who need it. So how do we go about creating a needs assessment? Is that something that we can engage our parent boosters in? Is that something we need to do ourselves? And is there some sort of template we can tap into for that?
I always like when it comes to these types of situations, you don't want to take a complex problem and have a complex solution. So how do we simplify it so that it's palatable and we can accomplish it and have our plan put together? So after you find out who your stakeholders are, obviously it's important to have that plan put together. The way I look at it is it really is a 3-step process. Assessing your needs. Do you have an inventory system that helps you track all of your assets, that you can easily see what are your needs right now, what condition is everything in, where are your gaps? Going through all the statutes in ESSER to see what relates to your program, I think are critical. And what's important to note about the bill as well is it requires a lot of stakeholder collaboration between the parents and the community and the administration of your school or district to be involved with that as well. So you'll want to have this plan together, but then also present it to many folks within the community to get their feedback and buy-in on it as part of that process, so that it's not done in a silo and it's done very collaboratively with your district. But to do a needs assessment of your program can be fairly simple. Looking at the statutes, how it aligns with your program, defining what your gaps are, and simply laying that plan out from a capital outlay standpoint is really a first step after you have determined who the stakeholders are, and then simply taking that to the appropriate stakeholders. And it differs by district. As you mentioned earlier, there's different sizes. It might be a smaller rural district with not a lot of red tape, so to speak. You might be going to just a building principal. In other larger districts, we see school districts going to school boards with their plans for approval and putting all these pieces together as one big ESSER package with music and the arts included with it. So as far as the template goes, we have some resources on our ESSER page that I'll share with you to share with the listeners, and they have some great things on there as well. We also have a link that'll show by district the estimated funding that is available by state and by district. So you'll be able to jump in there and click your state and search by your district. They'll tell you $56 million has been allocated. So you can go actually ask specifics. Where is this $56 million for our district, and be very well educated.
That is so awesome. So I assume with this plan, you mentioned that we should have some sort of inventory system where we're tracking that. I assume as an instrument manufacturer, there are some resources as to, how long instruments really should be in use. When do those, age out, let's say? And isn't there a Conn Selmer inventory system?
Yeah, absolutely. About 7, 8 years ago now, I created this inventory system just due to the demand we had from all the educators we were talking to, in that districts were asking folks for what is your current state of inventory, and they didn't have a good tool for it. There were Excel spreadsheets, Google Docs, things like that. So we created this free web-based system that we have about 15,000 schools on right now that are using this tool actively. It's for any of your listeners, we have educational support managers that are available on our team that are experts in helping put these plans together. If you do not have a good asset management system for your inventory, and not just instruments, there's obviously chairs, music stands, all the stuff that's included with your program. Those are all important things to keep track of. And this system can actually run that depreciation schedule you alluded to. NAM and the Music Achievement Council, I think over 10 years ago, came up with a standardization of that, where instruments have a certain lifespan and there's a depreciation schedule to it, which many districts don't really speak about. You may have a French horn that's 35 years old, great condition, and the school just sees that as an asset that's still worth a lot of money. However, after 10 years, like other assets within the school district, it should be valued at zero from a capital asset standpoint. A good example is, like, I've seen many schools have this gem of a Selmer Mark VI Barry sax or things of that nature in their inventory. And when you tell a teacher that, even though it's a Selmer Mark VI, it's from a capital asset worth nothing, heads explode, and it's hard to get your head wrapped around that. Yeah, the street value might be $7,000 because it's Selmer Mark VI, but like a desk or a school bus or anything else, those capital assets depreciate over time. Same thing happens with musical instruments.
And that is why we should all be required to take a simple accounting class so that you understand what depreciation expense really is. I don't think a lot of teachers even understand that every year, just like when you buy a car, it's instantly depreciated every time, and every year it gets less and less valuable.
Same exact concept. Yeah, think of a student that gets the saxophone for the first time in the classroom, and the alto sax comes down and it hits that chair and it puts the first dent into it. There's more depreciation for you. So
yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Even though you can take good care of it, and it might have street value. I love that street value on the black market. Selmer Mark VI. Nice. Okay, so that's all about ESSER funding, but what other types of funding can we tap into? Let's just say that I'm really averse to any kind of traditional fundraisers.
Mhm.
So what else can we do that's free or passive or accessible out there for us?
Yeah, I guess before I leave ESSER, because you triggered a thought on that as well, ESSER funding doesn't have to directly go towards your program. The one thing ESSER funding is going to do is pay for other pieces of the school district, which may open up other capital to come to your program. So you don't necessarily have to think of this that I need to get the ESSER funding. ESSER might make other money available. So I guess that's another way to look at it as well. As far as fundraising or things of that nature, alternatives for funding, parent booster programs are obviously a big assist for many programs across the country. Last data I saw was roughly 30 to 35% of music programs in the country have some sort of parent booster organization. We've recently started up a parent booster community that we're very excited about to help folks activate parents to help raise the money for programs. And we see some active parent booster programs across the country doing many great things. So that's definitely one thing to consider. There's, all the other things that happen too from a federal funding standpoint, not just ESSER funding, but if you are a Title I school and haven't considered digging into Title I, after this ESSER funding, obviously, because that's the big thing right now. But Title I schools, I think, need to take more advantage of the access and equity of music education in the programs. And I'm thinking too of urban districts and areas that are underserved. I think there's a tremendous opportunity for music education with other means of federal funding that's out there.
Well, I know that a lot of the nonprofit sector really got hit with COVID. And are there still grants out there even available?
Yeah, there is a great website to share with everybody called the Foundation Center online. If you reference that, it's $49 a month. And you can actually search by zip code and find foundations and nonprofits in your area that may fund music education. And what's interesting is there's about, last I looked, about $500 billion in the country that was granted in 2019. 2020, I haven't seen the final numbers yet because it was a different kind of year, so to speak. But a lot of that funding comes from private entities or private donors, things of that nature. And they typically don't publish their website just out in the public for everyone to get to them. So that's why you need to go to the Foundation Center online. But there are billions of dollars available in that arena. It's a little bit trickier because to write a grant, it's quite a process. And you have to go through qualifying, making sure you're talking to an organization that's aligned with what your mission is. So as an example, if I'm, say, an orchestra director and I'm calling up this organization for a grant and they're only granting money if I do a ukulele class, it may not match what I need. So I would disqualify that, move on to the next one instead of saying, well, maybe I need to do ukuleles, switched around. So it's important to qualify those specifically for what you're doing. And I really think with music education and what we do in that area, the impact it has on kids really resonates with a lot of foundations and folks that do give money. So once you do qualify a place as a match, I always encourage folks to at least make a phone call to them to say, here's who I am, and kind of the who am I, what am I, and what can I do for you? And have that first 5-minute conversation to see, is this a match before you go on and start writing grants. I see people write grants and without doing the front leg work, but grants can be a big help. I know Metro Nashville Public Schools did that for a long stretch with Country Music Association. There's some great information from that district out there on grant writing. There's still opportunity in that realm, and there's a lot of money out there. Just people have to roll up their sleeves and go for it.
But we shouldn't be afraid to go for it, especially if we've got a few weeks off this summer to work on it, right?
Absolutely.
We need to create a grant writing course.
I think that'd be phenomenal. There's a lot of great people in our profession that are good at it. And I think the more we can arm folks with the tools and resources to make grant writing not seem as daunting, I think would be awesome.
I've always found that you're more likely to get the grants that are most applicable to your school too. I feel like a lot of people do tend to go for, big national grants, and it can feel so daunting, but there's a lot of local organizations that have grant funds that come in direct from the community, and you're far more likely to get something from your own community than from a big national foundation, especially if you're just needing a few $100s, right?
Totally. Yeah. Like our headquarters is here in Elkhart, Indiana, and we have an Elkhart Community Foundation that's done a lot to support music education in the area here in the past. And yeah, definitely encourage everyone to find if you don't know who your local community foundation is, there's likely one where you are all across the country. And if you don't, the Foundation Center online can obviously help you find that as well.
Well, lots of school districts actually have foundations as well. I used to serve on the board of our local school district, and they're basically the parent booster program for the district and serve the
Nice.
needs of the district. So if you're struggling to find those key stakeholders, maybe see if there is a foundation that you can partner with, or that has a similar mission and could help, or at least bring people together to assist with that. I know with our own district foundation, if we were approached by a group of schools and they said, hey, we really need some help, getting this thing together, we totally would have done it.
Absolutely.
I assume that that's something we can get from ESSER funding too, right? Access to professional learning.
Professional learning and technology, all those pieces are part of ESSER big time. Absolutely.
Woohoo.
And we have a lot of great resources at Conn Selmer too, from a professional development standpoint, that can help a lot of districts. In fact, right now we're ramping up for our Conn Selmer Institute, which is June 14th through the 17th. We have about 90 sessions at this year's Conn Selmer Institute. Last year we had about 2,500 attendees, which was phenomenal. And we're covering everything for collegiate students, for new teachers, for band and orchestra directors. We have a day on social emotional learning and social justice, and access and equity to music education, and parent booster programs, and marching arts and show bands. There's just so much for everyone to attend this year. And your ESSER funding potentially could be used towards professional development to send many educators from your district to this event. And it's very accessible, $99 for all 4 days, and you can pick some things a la carte as well. But we'll drop that link as well for everybody. And we're looking forward to seeing another 2,500 to 3,000 people online here in about a month.
And I'm allowed to drop a discount code, right, for our listeners?
Absolutely. Most definitely.
Good. Well, I think that covers all of my questions, and you've told us so much about how Conn Selmer can help, but maybe just some words of encouragement for those of us who are feeling so lost right now.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to talk to thousands of educators over the last 16 months, literally. And, one of the things I've enjoyed seeing is the creativity of all our friends in music education and what they've done over the last year. It's easy to put your tail between your legs and say, you know what, enough, and I don't want to deal with this. But the kids need us. In talking with a few universities too over the winter graduation, they're thinking about, am I going to have a job, and what's happening out in the marketplace? And my message to those that are going into the profession is there are many people doing great things to make the programs wonderful for the kids, to keep them going through all this. And programs are going to be stronger than ever going forward because of the resilience of music educators that are out there. For anyone that's looking at going into the profession in college, I just encourage them that it is really up to you to build the program. All great programs I see across the country, it's that whether it's the person in elementary school working with the kids, or junior high on the podium, or high school, it's really that music educator that is making a difference in the lives of children. There's not a policy or a scheduling thing or all that. All of those things do come up, and there are things that make it more difficult for some than others. But I think I've seen everyone find a way to make it work during this time. Many people have found a way to make it work. So I'm very encouraged by that. And, for the sake of the decades to come after we get out of COVID, I think we're going to be stronger than ever, and the world needs music more than ever as well. And I think kids are going to see this as an opportunity to come out of this and be with their peers in music education and have a great time. And, I'm one of those too. I was one of the kids in middle school that used to move the timpani around for concerts, and those were my people, and there's a community and culture for all the kids that are in music. That's just vitally important. So with that, thank you to all the music educators for what they've done over the last year and say 14 months or so, and persevered. I am seeing, we're seeing a trek of better days ahead right now, and I do think this fall we're going to start seeing some more concerts, maybe still with masks on and things of that nature, but we're going to start seeing some more semblance of great music making together once again.
I hope that you enjoyed this little bit shorter episode, really impactful ways to get more funding for your program. There's a lot out there, so don't be afraid to go out and get it and create your dream program. Remember to visit the show notes page at smartmusic.com/blog. Just type in the podcast episode and you'll get to the show notes page. That's where you'll find all of the links that Mike and I talk about today. Remember, if you're looking for PD this summer, check out Conn Selmer Institute Connect at connselmerinstitute.com or the elementary and choir 2-day workshops at musiceducationsummit.org. Thank you again for spending this time with me. It truly is an honor to be able to support you and all of your continuing learning. Remember to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite way to get podcasts and give us a sweet 5-star rating. It does help other music educators find this content. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day, your week, your school year, your summer, and remember to keep teaching on.